The left will never stop their agenda to take over America. You are their enemy, and they will not negotiate. Prepare yourselves. Welcome to the Blue Shark Show with your host, Mike Lang.
Here we go again with GISD, and the plane controversy keeps going. We have another story from WFAA, William Joy, who was the original reporter that broke the story back in June, but it didn't come out till a few weeks ago. And now we're here to meeting the Dr. Glenn, the superintendent of Granbury ISD, along with the old board president, Barbara Townsend, called for this law firm, KBS law firm, Miles Bradshaw, to come in.
And did they put that to a vote?
No, they didn't. Of course they didn't.
Oh, okay.
So
I was just, they decided they did that on their own. They were
catching heat, right? They were catching heat, so they wanted to do an investigation, which is really an audit, because you don't send a law firm that specializes in, ISD business to come in and do an investigation. But nonetheless, they had a guy come in and present, was supposed to be for a few minutes, but he went into the whole aviation program and did an audit. And in the studio today, we have Nate. How you doing?
Good. And, Mike, I was at that meeting. It was funny when that attorney took the podium. He said, well, I think I can do this in about 10 minutes. About an hour and a half later, I finally walked out. I mean, it was a total filibuster. He was there to just, waste everybody's time and really play defense for the school.
Billable hours, right?
Yeah, you got to rack them up, man.
That's right. Well, that's good for him. Bad for the school district, right?
Bad for the taxpayers.
Exactly.
Business as usual in GISD.
Yeah, it's becoming that way, unfortunately. And we have Dave Eagle in the studio today. Dave, how you doing?
Doing well. Glad to be here. And I went to that school board meeting Monday evening, and it's the third time I've gone up there had something to say, and they bumped it to citizen comments to the very end, and I had other things I had to go do. So you accomplished your goal. I had to leave all three times now, so that's coming back to see you though.
Yeah, and that's what governmental bodies like to do, and we get in that later.
The corrupt ones, yeah.
Yeah, they bump comments to the back so everybody leaves and they don't get to hear people's grievances and whatnot. But moving on to Miles Bradshaw, who's part of this KBS law group. And Nate, you were doing some looking into this, and it's not just some, law group that's going to come in and investigate it and do a honest, fair job, what I would consider honest and fair. Aren't they just part of all this?
Yeah, Mike, I think they are. Looking at their website, it says right here, our attorneys are strong proponents of preventative law philosophy that a well-trained staff goes a long way in preventing and defending legal challenges. Now, this law firm specializes in defending public schools throughout the state of Texas. They're licensed by the Texas Education Agency to train district personnel and do all kinds of different stuff for these school districts, but their biggest function is to defend public school districts from civil litigation and help them prevent litigation. And in this instance, I think GISD was trying to do a little bit of both.
Right.
Defend from the public and prevent some litigation.
And, with the 90 minutes or close to 90 minutes of, Miles Bradshaw speaking, he probably touched on what was the most important, maybe 2 minutes, getting into, what was going on with, the airplane and the trips that Jimmy Dawson and his wife, Leah Dawson, took.
Yeah.
And it ended up being 6 different trips as far as they investigated or audited. And he only went up, I guess, 3 times with students. So, double the family trips from what he had the students do.
Yeah, so 6 times with family, 3 times with students. A lot of those were the quote-unquote discovery flights, which serve no educational function other than getting people interested in aviation. But, call me crazy, I don't think we need to have the assistant superintendent taking time. I'm sure he's a busy man. He's taking time to go basically take kids on joyrides and then go take his family on joyrides. His wife, who's also an administrator, she was involved in this. And
well, in the story, and let's play some of the WFAA news investigative story from William Joy. And this is from WFAA. It's not from us. They're doing some good investigative work, and let's see what they've come up with.
Tonight, trustees held their first board meeting since our investigation. William Joy is live outside that meeting. Willie, what happened?
Yeah, Izzy, for 90 minutes, we heard an auditor's report on the plane, and the district leader who used it said he regrets bringing negative attention to Granbury. But even after tonight, the board took no action, and there are still unanswered questions.
They did not violate any particular law or policy.
Granbury ISD tried to calm backlash Monday over the use of its private plane by sharing a new audit into the program.
I use the phrase gray area because I think that's what it is.
Speakers were a mix of those standing behind Dawson and those demanding answers.
Instead of handling this, stories were changed. There was not a reprimand, nor was there transparency.
I question the wisdom of the school district approving the purchase of a plane.
Granbury bought a private plane to encourage students' interest in aviation, but a month ago our investigation revealed Assistant Superintendent Jimmy Dawson used the district's plane for a family trip, taking his wife, also a district administrator, to see their daughter at college for her birthday.
School district really needs some very, or more specific, written guidelines without question.
The audit revealed Dawson has flown with students 3 times in 2 years, but with his family 6 times, mostly around holidays or spring break, and never had written authorization to fly. The presenter said Dawson didn't violate any policies, even though he doesn't teach students, because there weren't specific policies.
The district was getting the benefit of him doing what they asked him to do, and his family member was getting the benefit of a plane ride.
Should he face criminal charges? I don't know. Should he still be involved in the program? Absolutely not. In any way, shape, form, or fashion.
An ethics expert told us a family trip Dawson took on the plane could violate the state's ethics policy, but the presenter called his actions a gray area.
I think you need to look long and hard at whether or not you really want to own an airplane.
And the auditor said that Dawson's actions warranted either a written warning or a reprimand. But again, the board took no action tonight, and a district spokesperson told us that neither they nor district leaders would be answering our questions tonight. Live in Granbury, I'm William Joy.
Yeah, and I want to make a comment here about these discovery flights. The trustee Graft actually asked Mr. Bradshaw, well, what is that defined, and where's that term defined, and where did it come from? And he said he made it up. And I want everybody to understand that this law firm represents the school. This law firm was hired to represent their client. If you look at the professional rules of ethics for attorneys, they represent a client who is paying them. He was not there to represent the taxpayers. He was not there to represent any neutral, be a neutral third party. He was not there for any of that. He was there to shill for the school, and that's what he did.
And the whole reason that the district took it upon themselves, I think, to hire this law firm to come in and do this audit or investigation, and I could be wrong here, but I think it's because Dr. Glenn is too chummy with his subordinate, Jimmy Dawson, to be able to look at it objectively and take the appropriate action. Now, I could be wrong, but if that's the case, one of them needs to go.
Right.
Because if you can't
do both.
Be expected to lead the people that you're, fraternizing with.
Yeah, this was a clear cut, and I sat through this hour and 20-minute or 30-minute filibuster by this attorney, who basically didn't say much of anything. It was very irritating to listen to this, because I was sitting out there in the audience thinking, how dumb do you think we are out here? Apparently, they think we're pretty dumb. Number one. But number two, it was a total insult to the taxpayers to make us sit through that filibuster, and basically, by the way, pass by the citizen comments section, which this is the 3rd month in a row that they've just walked by the citizen comments section. That's actually was on the agenda prior to all this circling of the wagons.
And to add insult to injury, I thought it was funny, and Dave, you were there for this. The new school board president, Barbara Harrington, she had to call a recess because the attorney was late. So instead of doing citizen comments or, moving the agenda items around to get everybody out of there quicker or be able to expeditiously conduct a meeting like a presiding officer should, she decided to just, let's take a recess and wait for this guy to come here and play defense for us.
And as we go on with the story, Dawson did apologize and put out his own statement and said he was sorry that, his behavior may have reflected bad on Granbury ISD. And if you look at Miles Bradshaw, the attorney that came in to do the audit, he said that Dawson didn't violate any policies, even though he doesn't teach students, because there were no specific policies to be violated.
Well, you can't break the laws if they're not written, right?
Right.
You'd think not using district airplanes for family trips would be, you don't have to write that down. But I guess the school board now needs to codify that, because Dawson can't be left to, make a ethics call on his own.
Well, you can't be left to make an ethics call, but there certainly is one to be made. And both, Jimmy and Leah Dawson, in my opinion, broke that ethics, even though they say there's no policies in place. But they bought the airplane. They maintain the airplane. He's flown the airplane at least 6 times now with his family for vacations, over vacation period, spring break, things like that.
And I think it was 19 total trips. And this is kind of the key statistic. 19 total trips, only 3 with students. All the rest was either professional development or, taking his family up on a joyride.
And, going into, the written part of WFAA and their article, this says the law firm's audit uses interviews with Dawson and Kirk to justify the use of long flights. And so now they're interviewing Dawson and Kirk, who flew the planes without policies in place. And they're the ones they're interviewing to say, and remember who this law firm is now. They're there to protect them, Dawson and Kirk. They're not there to protect the citizens, right? So they're concerned now with neither has a proper license to teach students to fly, these 2 people. One pilot was allowed to use the plane to teach his son how to fly and took 14 flights. So you have no policy, no rules, no regulations from a standpoint of GISD, but you still have the matter of a GISD assistant superintendent and his wife, who's administrator, taking this plane for personal use.
And a teacher. That was the funny thing about, you just talked about it, but to say it explicitly, that teacher, the aviation teacher, well, come to find out, was doing the same thing Dawson's been doing.
And when you have that, you have a violation of the public trust. When you take it out for personal use, and we use the example of, a bus, I think was used last time on the WFA story, and we use the county. I think you were here, Dave, and we use the county, on a tractor or doing road work. And yet nothing was done during that specific meeting to say anything about Jimmy Dawson or his wife or anybody taking that plane.
It was funny hearing Melanie. She said, well, who authorized him to take these flights? And the attorney, kind of beat around the bush, and I think she asked him again, and he finally said, well, Dawson authorized himself. So there's your checks and balances. There's your, integrity right there. Well, he's the assistant superintendent, so he can, do whatever he wants, is basically what the attorney said.
Yeah, he can authorize himself to take personal flights over vacation, spring break, and things like that.
And another thing that really reeks of this whole issue, and this is a very this goes against Jeremy Glenn and the way they handle this. This whole thing has been couched in terms that the opponents of this, or the people that are calling them out for this airplane and these flights, are personally attacking the program. No one's attacking their aviation program. The aviation program is great. There's no problem with that. But you're diverting the issue because the attack is on a person's unauthorized use of government property. It's that simple. You don't need a 90-minute filibuster by a lawyer to deal with that one issue. And instead, you spent the whole time on people allegedly attacking the program. I haven't seen anybody attack their aviation program.
No, they talk about the plane, whether they need a plane, their own private plane, because you're going to have this exact thing happen, or whether they can have and team up with an aviation company, something like that.
Like every other school district with an aviation program in the state of Texas does. We are the only one to own our own plane. And I get it. Like, you know, we're a district of innovation. People don't know that, but GISD is classified by the state as a district of innovation. So they tried something new, and I get that. But here's the facts. They tried something new. It blew up in their face, and their employees and their upper level administrators can't be trusted with unchecked access to a Cessna. And with that being the case, they need to do like all the rest of the 5A and 6A school districts in Texas and just have a partnership with somebody, lease it. There's all kinds of nonprofits. Right. They talked about one, I think it was called the Crow's Nest or something. You know, there's other ways to skin this cat. We didn't have to buy a 1960s model Cessna, but they did.
And, you know, the report goes on with WFAA, and a TEA spokesperson said that Fort Worth ISD, and it goes on with, I believe, 8 or 9 other ISDs, all offer courses within the TEA's Aviation Regional Program of Study. But none of the districts that WFAA found received, you know, he didn't receive any responses, but they don't own their own planes, just like you said. So they're the only ones. And then Bradshaw makes another comment towards the end and says, look, the report suggests clear written guidelines around the program, cost-benefit analysis, and disciplinary action for Dawson. Just for Dawson, not the other Dawson.
Yeah. And, you know, when your own defense attorney says you need a slap on the wrist, you probably need something more serious than that. You know, and to his credit, I didn't expect him to even go that far, but he said, well, you might give them a verbal warning or maybe a written reprimand, you know, but if your own defense attorney is saying you need a written reprimand, maybe you need something a little more than that. I think 2-week suspension for both the Dawsons and Mr. Kirk would be appropriate in this instance.
And he goes on to say, Bradshaw does, the person auditing, I wouldn't call it an investigation. If one asks, should the school district have tighter controls that, if followed, would have prevented the perceived appearance of impropriety? Answer is yes. So there you go. If you would have had policy in place, but I think they need to change the whole program.
They need to sell that plane.
Keep the program, sell the plane, and like you said, partner up with somebody. But here you go. When the vote came up to ratify the agreement with the law firm, which is KBS and Miles.
So they just had a handshake agreement for $18,000 before the meeting,
yes.
I guess. And then it came time to pay the bill, and they took a vote.
Now it's time to pay the bill to ratify it, right? Because Barbara Townsend, the prior president, school board president, now it's Barbara Harrington, and the superintendent said, by golly, we're going to investigate this. We're going to get our own people on it.
Because we're too fraternized with Jimmy to do it ourselves.
Yeah. So this whole thing is just a huge debacle. So they go have their vote, right? And it's, of course, 6-1. Melanie votes against it because she believes that the whole board should have said, hey, this is what we need to do. This is what we need to vote on it. And, of course, this started in June. And once again, you know, nobody wanted to move on it. Nobody wanted to move. Now, all of a sudden, they get social media going. WFAA does a report. So now it's like, you know, we better get something done right now.
Well, and just to clarify, WFAA, they did good reporting on this. I'm sure somebody tipped them off and then they looked into it. My criticism with them is that they sat on this story, at least from September. When they cornered him in the hallway was September. What happened between September and December?
Election.
Yeah. Why didn't they move on it before that? I got to ask that question.
Yeah, you know why.
But at least they're willing to talk about it, which is more than we can say for, you know, a lot of other national news organizations.
Or local around here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Dave, what do you think from a standpoint of, you were there for most of the meeting. Melanie Graff voted and said, hey, I'm not going to ratify the agreement. Everybody else said, you know, go ahead and pay the bill, basically. I guess he did the work, so at some point in time you have to pay the bill. But it would have been nice to have something ahead of time from the board, right? I mean, you would want that as a commissioner.
No, I think that there's probably certain parameters where they can, under certain limits, where they can go and do something without making it a total board vote. But in the commissioner's court, for instance, if we were going to go hire an outside attorney to do any kind of work, it would come before the court, and we would vote on it no matter what the amount would be. And so it's interesting to me that the two foxes in there were able to go hire another fox to help, kind of defend the foxes. It's just, it's so in your face. I'm sitting there Monday night just thinking, this is so in your face that it's hard to describe it. And there was no, really, all they had to do was just go, we messed up.
Right.
We shouldn't have done it. Mr. Dawson will be dealt with, and we don't know what we're going to do yet, but we're going to deal with it, and we're sorry it happened, and it's not going to happen again. I think it would have been over with.
It would have. Right then and there. It would have been over in June if they brought it out. It could have been over in September when WFA did the report. If they would have just talked to William Joy, the reporter, and said exactly that. Hey, thanks a lot. This is what we're going to do. We did it. He's suspended for 2 weeks. Whatever it is, she's suspended for 2 weeks. And move along. The story would have been dead.
To me, it's just reeks of circling the wagons, and we're elitists, and we don't do anything wrong, and we're not going to admit to doing anything that we shouldn't have done.
And that's why I like that Melanie Graff voted no on the ratification of that agreement. And that's because I think they had enough time to get the board together. They could have called a meeting. They could have researched into who they wanted. But because they didn't, that allowed Dr. Glenn and Barbara Townsend at the time to cherry pick who they wanted to go out and defend it without the other board members having to say so.
And it's interesting that they were able to do that without a special called meeting. But they called a basically emergency meeting earlier this year to prevent Melanie from being able to put stuff on the agenda anymore. They can call a special meeting for that, but when their administrator gets caught taking joyrides in a freaking airplane, they don't have time for that. That'll just have to wait, and we'll do a handshake agreement until then.
This still has a certain portion to go through. I don't think we're finished yet. I think the board needs to decide on some kind of, I don't know if you want to say suspension. They're talking about a written reprimand or something. I think this leads itself to, because of the 6 trips and around vacation, I mean, it was definitely personal use. And if you're not going to go after them through the penal code legally, then there definitely, in my opinion, needs to be some type of suspension on both, Jimmy and Leah's, or anybody else that was involved on their record, and then move forward from there.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not saying fire anybody necessarily. I think that should be up to the board, but at least a suspension. I mean, if you're working let's say a blue collar job at a lumber yard, and you hop in one of their trucks and you go take it out on a joyride, take a girl out on a date or something, your boss finds out, what's going to happen?
You're going to be fired, plain and simple.
And, we can cut them some slack, I guess, but at least a suspension. And for their own defense attorney to say, again, their own defense attorney said he needs a written reprimand.
And well, that's just to appease everybody and move along, because he kind of wants to get this thing over with, just like a lot of people do. And, it's kind of like I said in the beginning, Jimmy Dawson, take your lumps and move along, but that's not what Dr. Glenn has in mind. And I really think at this point in time, and where I've stood with him over the past year or two, but I think he's kind of spearheaded this. And if he would have been a little bit stronger on this and said, hey, sorry, Jimmy, you're going to have to stand up, it would have been a little bit different. But no, we get this song and dance and this dog and pony show from Miles Bradshaw and his favorite attorneys, whatever it is, the KBS Law Group, and it turns it into another in your face for the citizens. And that's the portion I don't like, that still they're defending somebody that should step up and say, hey, I did wrong. Let's put this story to bed. Let's put it to rest. 2 weeks off without pay, whatever it is, and move along.
And because Dr. Glenn could not discipline his own employee, his own subordinate, the district had to spend an extra $18,000. I think they would be justified in docking that from his pay, because, they had to spend it because he said he's too chummy with Jimmy to to discipline them.
You know, this gets into a more systemic issue in my view as well. They did everything they could do to stifle. It's just like the other night that the school board meeting was standing room only. And there were, I don't know how many citizens ended up speaking and having to wait the entire evening to speak. But the mere fact that they bumped the citizen comments back to the end and had to sit through that 90-minute filibuster, you know, that was a punishment in my opinion.
Yeah, it was.
That was a punishment by Barbara Harrington. And, you know, she has like 87 years of experience sitting on that school board.
At least 90.
And you'd think she would know how to conduct a meeting. You know, she didn't call any attention to citizen comments. She took a recess in the middle. She was doing stuff all out of order. I mean, if that's what experience gives us, we don't need that much experience on the school board.
Well, and to get back to my argument about systemic, if you go look at the commissioner's court, what y'all are having a show on that about what happened in commissioner's court and how the judge threw somebody out of court. These people are elitists. They don't want to hear any criticism. They don't want to hear somebody come in there and call them out. And what you've got, it's with the school district, it's with the county commissioner's court, it's with the city. The city bumped the citizen comments to the end. You know, that's telling, to me, that's telling you, Mr. Taxpayer, that you're the last one in line. You know, we don't want to listen to you. We don't want to hear you. And if you have the fortitude to stand through or sit through this entire meeting, then we'll listen to you.
And that's the way it is. And things keep getting moved. And even the commissioner's court, you know, Jack Wilson put it back on the commissioner's court here a few months ago, several weeks ago. And, of course, he pulled it off because people were, you know, kind of outraged, saying
public pressure.
Yeah, the same thing you're talking about. And, you know, it's because of the citizens that you're elected and you serve the citizens. And when we get back to this Jimmy Dawson deal on the plane, we've got people that are going, who cares? Let them fly the plane, you know.
Yeah, no big deal.
No big deal. You know, what's all this, you know, problem about? And what do you guys, you know, what's Blue Shark doing? Just messing with everybody? And it's like, guys, come on. This is accountability. This isn't Blue Shark that took the plane up, the GISD plane. And if we did, boy, there'd be like headline news in the Hood County News.
We'd have been hung already.
Yeah, so it's not us doing it. This is Jimmy Dawson and his wife, and we're bringing attention to it. And that's what people don't like. They don't like Blue Shark bringing attention to, you know, whether it's video, audio, documentation, further reports from WFAA. They don't like it when we bring attention to their good old boy network. And why can't we have things just keep going along like they always did? Why do you guys have to mess into something and tell people what's going on here in Hood County and in Granbury?
And what's crazy to me is that this issue in particular, and a couple others over the last couple of years, have turned into bipartisan issues. Come to find out, even some of the people on the farthest left side of the spectrum have at least a tiny speck of ethical, an ethical compass. And they, too, are speaking out against this. This isn't just the crazy right-wing Republicans. There's also some straight-up commies that are against this.
Well, and look at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram and Bud Kennedy. I mean, he's calling them out himself. I mean, how much further to the left can you get? Because he's no fan of us.
No, not at all.
He hates our gut.
Yeah, he's not a friend of ours. But
and the only people circling the wagon right now are the squishes, are the establishment. It's the good old boys. It's the people that whenever you say, hey, the government is misbehaving and everyone needs to know about it because they're supposed to be serving us, they say, oh, if you're saying that, you know, if you're calling attention to this, you must hate aviation program. You must hate Jimmy Dawson.
You hate
must
the
hate
kids.
Public education.
You
must hate little puppies. You must,
You hate your mother.
Yeah,
you know, they go straight to the personality side of it instead of looking at the issue and saying, Jimmy, you screwed up. If you'd have just taken your lumps like a man, this would have been over months ago.
Facts and truth, and when you speak facts, when you speak truth, you have documents, you have video, you have audio, and you still have people that don't want to hear it, then that's their problem. That is, you know, they can't accept it. They want things done their way. They can't stand any type of proof, of truth. And that's what's going on in Granbury. And I think little by little, and you're talking about, you know, the left and the right and different, you know, things. These are, what, 2 or 3 issues now. Everybody's getting together. Everybody's sick of it. You know, it's like, stand up for what you believe, stand up for what you believe, and I'll stand up for what I believe. But when you mess up, whether you're Republican or Democrat, and it's like this, take your lumps. You know, whether you're Jimmy Dawson, whether you're Leah Dawson, whether you're Judge Massengill, you know, we had a video about that. Take your lumps and move along, because you're creating more controversy when you don't. Like I keep saying, video, audio documents, look at the proof. It's not us talking about it. This is what Jimmy Dawson did. This is what Leah Dawson did. And people like to, like you said, deflect that and say, what's Blue Shark doing? Why are you guys doing this? Because it's wrong, and they need to be accountable. And they are spending taxpayer dollars, my dollars, your dollars, that we earn through what we work, and giving it to, well, I say giving it to, it being taken from us and given to the school district to run the schools. And that's why, folks, we have a problem with this. If it was a private business and they were doing that, they'd have been fired a long time ago. That would have been their business. They could do whatever they want. But it's taxpayer dollars. So if you have a problem or don't have a problem with it, have your opinion, great. But these are the facts.